That way we're ahead of ourselves, right?
No bloody way. How did we do that?
You're listening to Nerds Out of Water with Michael Lobb and David Camus. Nerds Out of Water is a podcast brought to you by David Camus and Michael Lobb. That's me. I am the managing director of a company called TeamScale, and we help companies manage their IT projects to keep them on time, on budget, and on track. David, tell us about what you do.
Hi, my name is David Camus. I'm the director of One Bright Cloud. I lead a group of techs and futurists. We look at some interesting things like autonomous vehicles, drones, AI, and public safety.
So we challenge ourselves during this podcast, and we want to see each other's perspectives. And we don't always agree. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But after listening to this podcast, you'll definitely have an idea about what we're talking about. So, David, you were unable to make the podcast last week because your internet was broken. Tell us what happened.
Well, we had a number of storms come through the Sanford Valley area where we are. We were managed to lose our internet, which is the old ADSL, which is the old copper. And we then lost our backup, which is the 4G, because the lightning took out the tower. So we literally were very quiet. The office had no internet, no phones, no mobiles. It was quite archaic and very, very nice to be at.
Right, so you got a forced tech-free holiday.
A forced tech-free, and we've spoken about that in the past, I believe, having tech-free holidays.
We have.
And I had a forced tech-free holiday, which meant I had to cross over the range to be able to get any tech to get us onto mobile or anything. So I decided to let you go for your life with the Nerds Out of Water podcast, which I noticed you did.
I had a little bit of a rant, which I've done this before. I've had a rant and just gone nuts, and that was fine. You back on ADSL, or are you on 4G, or what's the story?
No, we came back up on 4G for about 4 days, and then finally we had the ADSL brought back on. We're hoping to get some better internet connectivity over the next few months, but we'll see how that goes. For me, I'd love to get 5G.
Wasn't the NBN supposed to connect everyone in Australia?
Everyone who's near a road.
Except Sanford Valley.
No. Everybody who is near a main road will be connected. So our main road is about 2 kilometres away, which means we have a kilometre of additional private connection to do, or we just use the old copper, which is our ADSL, which is where our problems are to start with.
So interestingly enough, I found out the other day from the tech that our NBN comes down the road, but it's copper coming down the road.
Yes, so most of them most NBN goes to the, I was going to say a pit, but it's not a pit, to the box, and then from the box out to the house is copper.
Yeah, we're one step removed, so we've got copper down the road to the exchange, and then in our case, we're coax into the house.
And I wonder why you've got slow internet.
Well, this is Australia. Our office in Vietnam, our office in the Philippines has so much better internet. I just love sitting there when it's speedy.
And the UK. So the fibre used to be fibre to the node, and then the original idea was fibre to the house. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah. Oh, man. Anyway.
Then we'd still have half of the internet that Vietnam's got.
Yeah, well, I mean, 5G is coming out. I don't have my tin hat on at the moment, but I know that there's a lot of conspiracy around it. So I am looking forward to seeing what that does. I don't have 5G here, although we do have 5G on the Gold Coast. I am in the Apple ecosystem, so that probably won't happen for a little while. I know Samsung have got some 5G phones coming out soon.
Oh, and the Samsung S20. I've been looking at the Samsung S20. It's in the region of $2,000 Australian dollars, but it's
$2,000 for a phone.
$2,000 for a phone. It has 4 camera lenses, I think it is on the back, 1 on the front, and the 100 times zoom. I have been looking at it. I am quite thinking I should take the step just to test it, of course.
It's optical zoom, or is it optical zoom, or is it digital zoom?
No, yeah, it has a. How did they put it? It has a reflected optical, or mirrored optical zoom, and then it goes up to 5, or is it 10? And then after that, it's a digital zoom.
Right.
But the capacity is amazing.
I have an old phone. It's not an old phone. It's perfectly usable. It's an iPhone 8, and everyone else has got like 10s and 11s and Samsung S, whatever the hell they're up to now.
Yes,
I'm okay with a model or two behind. I'm okay with a model or two behind. I don't use the camera other than to take happy snaps. You know what I'm like. I use an actual camera to take photos of actual people actually posing, actually with lighting. My camera on my phone is to capture the moment. But hey, I'm not an Instagrammer really. Hey, one of the things that happened to me while I was researching the stuff that you wrote in that we've been collaborating on, just so everyone knows, the back end of this show as we go through. We've just got this one or a few Google Docs that we just put topics into as we see them over the week. And I've been clicking on a few things that David sent through. And what really fucking frustrates me is the paywalls. So I click on a link and it's like, oh, you have to be a member to see this. I read a lot of news, and I'm happy to subscribe to a news service. I do subscribe to a couple, but I'm not going to subscribe to 15 of them just so that I can see an article written by someone whinging about something else. And it really, really frustrates me. There needs to be a news aggregator, and I thought Apple News would do this, but there needs to be an aggregator that pays and I guess this comes back to journalism and as a whole, and this is what happened to the music industry, I guess, is we need to pay our journalists. Journalists are the people who get the news out to the public, and they need to be compensated for doing their job, and they need to be compensated in a way that is not just telling them to report on this or that. They need to be compensated to report on news. And an aggregator like Apple News or like whoever is doing this needs to be able to provide funding through subscriptions to pay journalists to make stories that reflect what we want to read. Now, I live on the Gold Coast. Every time I click on a link that I see on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on Twitter, it goes to the Gold Coast Bulletin, if it's from the Gold Coast, and there's a paywall there. There's no way I'm going to subscribe to the Gold Coast Bulletin. It's a free paper that comes around every week. I'll read it in the cafe tomorrow. It's just frustrating. It really is frustrating. David, what do you subscribe to any news?
Well, first of all, have you finished your rant?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Wow. No, I actually don't subscribe to any newspapers or news. What gets me with the online newspapers is that I will click on a link, it will go through, I will be able to read that article. I might share that article on LinkedIn with you, with a number of other people, and then I realise that when they click on it, it's all of a sudden all they get is the first paragraph or half a paragraph.
Perpetuating the problem.
I know. But what happened with newspapers when they were paper? You had to go out and you had to buy the old 20 pence paper and you had to look at it. Or you went down the coffee shop and you grabbed one and you tore out the articles that you liked. Now
here's the thing. I subscribe to Netflix. I subscribe to all of these things. I subscribe to Medium. I subscribe to Apple News or News Plus or whatever it's called. And I expect that these news outlets, and I call them news outlets because they are the digital newspapers of today. I expect that when I click on a link from someone like yourself, that I'll go there and it'll say, oh, it's okay. He's got a subscription to this newspaper, so I'll show him that version of the story.
Okay.
Now,
Michael, look at the links that the newspapers that are in our links. One is sciencealert.com. One is highsutton.com. These are newspapers and editorials that will never be in somebody else's capture. We purposely look for way out there articles so that we can talk about really unusual things. And I just don't think they're going to be captured by
the New York
Times.
The New York Times, Rolling Stone, the Gold Coast fucking Bulletin. Most of the Australian newspapers, where they have an online site, they have a paywall, and you're allowed to look at 3 articles or 4 articles per month, and it's like, that's stupid. So I just get on a VPN and I pretend that I'm coming from San Francisco, and I've got another 4 articles, and then I go to South Korea, and then I've got another 4 articles, and I've just got to trick it. But I wish that these newspapers were able to go to an aggregator and say, you know what, just give us a couple of cents per view, or a fraction of a cent per view, however many, whatever. And I don't know what the business model is behind this, but an aggregator should be able to say, hey, give us your news. We'll aggregate it. We've got people paying for it, and we'll distribute that money to you based on views. Same as they do for music, same as they do for. I hope so, because it's frustrating.
It doesn't happen.
No, but
some of these really remote newspapers won't get it.
But the remote newspapers are all owned by the same 3 people in Australia, and probably the same 15 people around the world. So, Anyway, that's my rant for today.
You're on a roll, aren't you? You had it last week, and I gave you some freedom last week, and you've just taken it on.
Anyway, have you got any further comments on that, or should we move on to the next topic?
No, I think we should start talking about what we've thought about looking into, the Knightscope security robots.
Right. So this is one of them, but one of the articles that I clicked on that took me through a paywall. But I managed to find a lot more about these because luckily Knightscope have been advertising, and they're trying to get a lot of information out there. So these security robots are robots that patrol things like shopping malls and docks and things that have really accessible for robots areas, and they use a lot of internal AI. So they use vision, so they facial recognition and things like that. Plus, they use a lot of AI to understand what. Yeah,
they got LiDAR, they've got radar, they've got the AI, they've got vision, if you want to call it vision. They come in many different modes and models. There are the police robots that stand up. There are ones that are outside, so they've got them walking around or rolling around parks. And then they have a couple of four-wheel drive capabilities.
These things kind of look like a Segway with a robot on it.
Oh, I see. I like the ones that look like Daleks.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So this is our the mouse droids of Star Wars that just run around. They're little tiny things that run around their Star Destroyers, and then I don't know, they do deliveries, but they also keep security up and all of that. And this is really cool because this is science fiction becoming science reality.
And I have to say it's so cool that I have been in conversations with Knightscope about bringing them into Australia. But Knightscope will not or are not able to look at any area off of American soil. They are tied for American soil due to the AI that they utilize.
Right.
So
why is that though? Is it
well, it's the same way as when they had the hash. They had the new hash, the 124-bit hash that wasn't allowed out of the US for a little while, and now it seems like everyone's got it. But I think that's a major opening. So if there's any robotic companies in Australia who are looking at police robots, I would be interested. Get in contact with me.
So what's Hollywood going to make movies about in the future when Paul Blart Mall Cop?
Well, hopefully not this particular article that I raised up last week, because these police robots, they're the night security robots. They're going around parklands, they're going around shopping centres, as we've said. There was a case in Los Angeles in a park where a lady saw people fighting and she ran up to the police robot that was patrolling the park, and she kept shouting at it, saying, "I need you to call the police. I need help, help, help." And the robot just turned to her and said, "Step out of the way, step out of the way," and went on its route. A passerby ended up by phoning 911, so phoning the emergency services to get get help.
So that's voice recognition, and you know the problems I have with Siri. Hey Siri, tell me a joke.
This one's for the kids. What do you get when you cross a vampire and snowman? Frostbite.
Oh, frostbite.
Yep. So that's pretty much all I do with Siri, because whenever I ask her an actual question, she's like, "I'm sorry, I don't have access to that." And exactly what this woman would have experienced. She's run up to the police robot and said, "Help, help, call the police." And the police robot's gone, "I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying."
And we don't know if she had an accent. We don't know.
Well, that's a really interesting thing. Bias is a really important thing in voice recognition. Did you know that an American white male is more likely to be understood than anybody else for voice recognition?
And that's the same as skin color. Facial recognition is far better for a pale skinned person than it is for a darker skinned person.
So we're more likely to get caught by facial recognition.
Yeah, there's algorithms that are now being developed that are getting over this. But Google, the phones, when they started coming out with the facial recognition, were ignoring darker skinned people for many, many different reasons. And it's training.
It's just training, isn't it?
It's training. That's right. And there was a particular, and I can't remember the article of the lady. There was a particular dark-skinned lady who really took this on and did some really good work out of one of the universities over in the US to develop some code to make this far better for everybody.
So there's a TED talk about keeping human bias out of AI by Kriti Sharma. And that is also attacks this problem as well. And it's really interesting. If you want to have a look, I'll post that on LinkedIn or Twitter.
But there is always going to be some sort of bias with AI because somebody has to write the code behind it.
Well, the code is written, but then they've also trained that code as well.
Yep,
so
that's right. So neural networks have to learn. Yeah,
they've learnt from analyzing 2 billion pictures of people. So these Knightscope security robots, what can we do in Australia? Like, what does an Australia look like where robots are patrolling shopping malls? I go, let's say you and I pop into Chermside for a coffee, and we've got security robots patrolling Chermside.
But maybe it's better if they're patrolling the car parks or the parks.
So my question is, what are these little robot guys doing that's better than CCTV, which can also be fed into AI to do the same sorts of things?
but CCTV is very controlled to where it can see. These robots go on a path that is obviously, again, controlled, but is more random than where the cameras can be.
Right, so they can get into places that the CCTV cameras can't.
Yep. And they can then move to areas where there are or maybe an issue happening, apart from in this particular case where they got ignored.
Yeah, they got told, get out of the way, you're in my way.
So, Michael, you have a lot of work going on in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Is the coronavirus causing you any issues at all?
Look, it hasn't caused us any issues, but we have made sure that our staff are safe. We've asked them to work from home if they don't feel safe. We've also made sure that there are health measures in place in the buildings that we're working in and things like that. But also, the thing is we're trying to make sure that we know what's going on. We're aware of the things that are happening to make sure that we know what's happening so that we can keep an eye on our team.
I want to look at some of the facts that's coming out of the World Economic Forum at the moment. And I've been doing some research into it and looking at how much this is wiping off of the Earth's economy at the moment. And I've written a couple of things down here. And leaving China aside, we'll touch on China. So with China, we have problems with Apple iPhones, Apple computers, because their back end is Foxconn from China, and they're having production delays. Jaguar, Nissan, Hyundai, they've all got closures on their car plants because they cannot provide vehicle parts. Italy, I think I read 3.9 billion euros, so $4.2 billion is being wiped out from Italy, and they believe 15,000 companies or smaller companies will go bust over the next few months because of this. Because there are companies that are just not able to move equipment around, people around, and they're losing their livelihoods. There is so much happening in Italy at the moment. But then in Brisbane, Tiger Air, the global airline revenue is being reduced by $5 billion for this quarter. Yeah. It's just amazing facts
people
that
aren't
are coming
flying
out of this.
To Asia now. Yeah.
They're not flying to Asia. Internal in Australia, and I think this is happening in Europe, in Asia, flights are being cancelled and people just are not travelling. I had a meeting with Skull, which is the hotel and resorts travel industry, and they are losing money at the moment because we're not getting the people into the hotels. And think of Euro Disney and the larger companies that are trying to bring money in.
Interesting. So one of the things that probably doesn't actually have a monetary cost associated with it, a lot of places in China and Hong Kong and around Asia, they're closing schools and businesses. I happen to know a lot of expats in Asia and in China, and their children can no longer go to school and they can't go to work. I had a friend who recently flew back to New Zealand, and his wife's business, their policy said that she had to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. So she couldn't go to work, and the children couldn't go to school. And this is only because, they flew back from China. There is also an educational, issue in China at the moment and I really only know expats there, but there's boredom. So people are locked. People are basically locked in their apartments. Not locked, but they're in their apartments. They don't want to go out, and they're suffering from boredom. And how do you deal with that? Because you've heard about the hundreds and hundreds of people on the cruise liner near Japan. What were they doing for 6 weeks? They were just running in circles around, trying to get some form of exercise or outdoor activity.
But Germany, Italy, all across Europe, we're having these problems.
There's a huge financial impact, but I think that the financial impact is going to be amplified by this impact, the non-financial impact of people not being able to do things that they normally do.
So what I've been trying to have conversations with over the week is with people about what are we going to do in 4 months? 4 months, 6 months, when this epidemic, pandemic, whatever it's going to turn up has come, gone, has been settled somehow, and we have an economic downturn. And I know the Australian government has put in $37 million for local travel agents and travel industry companies to advertise locally to encourage Australians to travel in Australia. And I heard the first adverts come out only yesterday about now's the time to travel in Australia. I wasn't sure whether they were because of the fires that we'd recently had or whether they were because of the next round, which is the virus, but they started already.
Yeah. Well, it really is the time to go and spend some time in Australia because of the fires and because, realistically, we're Australians and I do go to Asia a lot, but that's mostly for work. But Australians go for holidays in Bali and Phuket and places like that where it's not China, but it's close enough that people get nervous. So they're stopping, they're just cancelling their flights or they're claiming the insurance if they can.
Fiji, Vanuatu, they're all having the differences.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I travel a lot overseas, Bali, Fiji, Vanuatu, for holidays. The reason why I do that is because it's cheaper for me to take my family over there than it is to holiday in Australia half the time. And that's a sad point, but it's a truthful point.
Right now, are the costs getting cheaper in Australia or are they?
I'm hoping this is the time where Australian travel industry takes a hard look. And I know they have a lot of costs involved from their own livelihoods and also from the government and taxes, but very different to overseas. But we take a look, we make it cheaper, we do some self-funding, we bring in the government funding to make it cheaper, and we encourage people to travel in Australia, around Australia, and stay at Australia. And as you know, during the just after the fires, I took my family out and we went out west and we went to 3 or 4 towns that had suffered major fires and we took nothing. We purposely paid for everything on our trip to put money back into the local industry.
Nice. And I mean, that's what people should be doing. And not only that, but once this thing is settled down, and I hope it settles down, as in the coronavirus, we do need to get back into traveling, and that's our job. We're Australians. We love to travel.
Agreed. So just to finish up on the coronavirus, I think everyone needs to just take care of themselves. They need to look after their families, obviously, and because your health is number one priority. Don't take or make offence to people who have a cough. For Australians, let's travel in Australia. If you're from Europe, travel in Europe. America, travel locally. So that way we're keeping our own financials in-house and it'll work for everybody.
Yeah, great. Look, this has been a good discussion and I think, we've got a lot to learn on these topics. For God's sakes, wash your hands after you've been to the toilet.
Okay,
That's my third rant. That's my third rant for today.
You don't get any more, you know that.
This has been the Nerds Out of Water podcast. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or on whatever podcast app you're using, please rate us and leave a comment. We love to hear comments. If you're looking for either of us, I'm at Michael Lobb, MichaelLobb, on Twitter. David, are you on Twitter?
I am. I'm Dave with 7 on Twitter, or you can contact me.
Dave with 7.
Dave with 7. We'll go into that another time. Or you can contact me directly at david@onebrightcloud.com.au or leave a message below.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.